Senator Cadell.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. I don't think Senator Sterle in that last thing made things more complicated at all. I think he made it easy. His reference to the road transport industry and the issues they had, bringing legislation in this place to fix it. This is exactly what Senator McKim seeks to do now. I think it's become crystal clear that we can all stand up and talk about the problems we hear on this committee. We can hear about the farmers, we can hear about the consumer costs, but it takes something to come in with an answer, and that is what this bill is. This bill comes in with a big answer that can be there as a big stick to these people when they do it wrong. And it's not if for the whim of a person, it's not because we feel like doing something today. These only come in with a court appointment appeal for abuse of market power or unconscionable conduct. Now, what sort of business would be fearful of being held to account under those purposes? They are activating everyone they can to come out and say, no, this is horrible, this is the worst thing in the world. The supermarkets, they're out there, they've got BCA, they've got all these people out there because they're fearful that they are partaking in this unconscionable conduct and abuse of market power. Otherwise, they wouldn't fear it so much. I noticed Brand Black from the BCA, a quote of his: "The short point of these in-powers are an impediment to businesses growing. When the businesses don't grow, they don't hire staff." Well, let me tell you, at 65%, 66%, 67% of the market share, we don't want these to grow. That is the point. Brand's got it. You have too much power. And this bill is just, I know the Greens don't like nuclear, but this is the nuclear button when they go too far. And there'll be other things. There are other things we can do, and this committee is great at looking at them. We're hearing from them. We're getting into it. But this needs to be there in supermarkets, and I would say this broad power is good enough anyway, because we have an air industry where 90% is controlled by the two big ones. We found out in Bunnings, believe it or not, live plants come under the grocery code at Bunnings, has 70% of the market. And if you want abuse of market power, forget what even the testimony that comes out in our committees. How about the testimony that doesn't come there from the producers and the processors who are too scared to talk because they have two customers who are on the chopping block here, and if they say their own businesses will be there. You don't need any evidence other than that. If people are too scared to talk about unconscionable conduct, it's happening, and retribution will happen. And we hear about this is the worst thing in the world. I think Senator McKim raised Soviet-style communist power, things like that. Well, he raised the United States. But OECD countries with some form of divestment power, the United States for violations under Section 2 of the Sherman Act. Germany, under the German Competition Act, they can do it irrespective of illegal conduct. They can do it on the whim. They've got that power. France, United Kingdom, Austria, Canada, Estonia, Iceland, Israel, Italy, Japan, Mexico, Portugal, Slovenia and Spain. We are one of the few that doesn't have this power. And when we hear, I think, some numbers over there when we're talking about Costco and the big one, when we hear the numbers on margins from people who are too scared to come in and be able to swear a witness, so we can't rely on these things in our report. But we hear someone that's a controller of a pantry section, area manager of a supermarket, talking there about they require 40% margin in the pantry section. In the fresh food section privately, they've come and told me they want 100% markup average across their food. They are big margins. And we hear, interestingly, we threw Costco into the bin. I have a processor who supplies a number of supermarkets who does supply Costco. They went to them with a Costco pricing proposal to make 25% margin on one of their products. And Costco actually said, no, we'll take 18. We give our customers between 16 and 18% markup on this because they have a different business model. But that's the markup others are having. And I note that the reviews we're talking about, the ACCC review, he has power to go back and ask for 2 to 3 years of data and market share margins, all these sorts of things. He's asked for 5. And the supermarkets will probably give that. Why? Because they have been increasing their margin for 15 or 20 years. And 5 years' data will not show the picture, and he will get through it. They'll show 5 years, our margins only slightly increased. Go back 15 or 20, and they'll say they've been getting Australians, hitting the farmers, hitting the consumers, bit by bit by bit. They're addicts to increasing their margins, to taking their money and screwing over everyone else they deal with. And it's just become visible in the last few years when the suppliers and the processors can give no more. They're at their wits' end, they have no margins. We have farmers up there shaking. I was in an incident in Bathurst. I'm not proud of what I did up there. I've got 2 guys in pig suits downstairs because I've got a farmer upstairs shaking, scared about giving evidence. Another one talking about 100 years of his farm, and this him being the last generation. Another guy who walked off their farm. And we've got people who want to make stunts, people who want to say things that are identifying the problem but not coming up with a solution. This bill is a solution. It is not perfect. No one here is saying it's perfect. But to be clear, politicians stand on the fence sometime, and I think where a vote would come today might be problematic to get this through, but I would stand on that side if this came to a vote today and support it irrespective of what the parties would do. And that is why we're here. And so when Senator Sterle talks about the way they fix the trucking industry, this is just the same. It is a legislative fix to a real problem. When we hear all these stories, and from a supplier, Mark, we can shoot the NFF down as we want, but we can't shoot the New South Wales farmers down. Their engagement is real. When they came to Orange, they told horrible stories, they told real things, of trucks being turned around after they deliver their goods because they don't meet a standard, they're too big, they're too small, or they're the wrong colour, too straight, not straight enough. When we hear of consumers in Tasmania, the stories of people dumpster diving to get a meal because they can't afford things anymore. And once again we see this margin in the middle growing and growing over time, and the cost getting bigger on one end and the returns getting smaller on the other end. The supermarkets never lose. They're like the casino of Australian commerce. The supermarkets never lose. And so I think this is where we start. A bill like this with great powers to reflect great wrongs, and then we get down to the other things that come through in the minutiae. We talk about they have arbiters for disputes with supermarkets when we go through. But guess who appoints them? The supermarkets. So if I'm fearful to give evidence about what's happening, am I going to actually go to someone appointed by the supermarket and complain about it? Probably not, because I want to be able to sell next week's crop or next month's produce. We need independent arbiters. We need proactive arbiters who go out and audit so that growers have cover for talking to them, so they're not punished for talking to them. We need transparency on prices. We need transparency on margins. We need to know historically how have they increased over time while they're screwing the farmer, while screwing the processor, and then getting the consumer on the far end. An amazing one, again, someone too scared to talk, is their olive oil. In 2012, it was $25 on the shelf. In 2022, it was $25 on the shelf. And today it is $45 on the shelf, because they've been held down so long, can't get margin. And the word that supermarkets keep coming up with is mitigate. Your costs have gone up, mitigate. Don't look at what the Australian standard is on what Australian fruit and vegetables cost. The Brazilian index on juice has only gone up 17%, but you're asking for a 25% price rise. Mitigate. What they're saying is buy overseas. Don't support Australian industry. Don't support Australian farmers. It is a fix. They are addicted to squeezing every cent. There's a great boxing phrase that I learnt once about Don King, the great boxing promoter. True humanitarian said the phrase. He only wants the first 26 cents out of every quarter you earn. That is what the supermarkets are like. They want everything out of you. And if it's not supplying goods that perish in 5 days but having to supply pallets for 28 days so they don't have to pay pallet hire, If it's the paper bags, remember back in the day when I used to go with Mum and Nan up to the Broadmeadow Nineways and do some shopping, everything came home in paper bags. Well, we had to start charging for plastic bags because that was environmental responsibility. Now we've changed to paper bags, but we'll keep charging. In fact, we'll charge a little bit more because there's somewhere else we can get you. That is abuse of market power. And on this side, in my party, we have not always recognised the threat that says when we have gone away from some single desks or trading blocks. And I'm not here to defend the legacy when we are wrong, but clearly we have thrown growers and producers, under the wheels of the truck back in the day, and see the error of that now. But if these people are truly scared of having to sell off a Big W or a Liquorland or something like that because they do the wrong thing, they will act better. If they are scared that their boards will be answerable when they lose these things, they will act better. Because it is a true fact that power only likes power, responds to power. And when you have 66% of the market, and we can talk about all these the stores, they aren't in the same league. And the other guys, to try and compete, have to participate in some of the very same things we hate just to try and compete with the big guys. But all of the talking points of the BCA, of the big businesses, are wrong. They are trying to protect the status quo. They are trying to protect the size of business that we see as the actual problem. And the only way to get cheaper prices and a better supply chain is to minimise that gap in the middle, is to minimise those margins and to make better practices. It is the only way, because you can't have everything. I can't get my farmers and people in New South Wales getting better money for their produce and consumers being able to get a better thing unless we squeeze these margins. So I commend this bill. It is a difficult thing for this side of the House because it is not perfect, but it's as close as we get. I look forward to working on the committee going forward until I think May 7 is the reporting date, to potentially work on what we can do to adjust this, adjust other things, put in other mechanisms so that we have something that gets these supermarkets very accountable to the Australian people, very, very accountable to their growers. I am very pleased to be a part of this. It is probably the most enjoyable and valuing thing I've done since I've come to the chamber. And we don't just want to stand up and point out problems. We want to come here with solutions. This is one. Thank you, Senator McKim, and I would support